Jacob. The voice cut through the wind like a blade through silk. Quiet, familiar, impossible. Jacob Marlowe pulled his horse to a stop in the middle of what used to be a street. Dust spiraled around the animal's legs. The town had no name anymore. The signs had rotted off their posts years ago, leaving only rusted nails and splinters. Buildings leaned into each other like old men too tired to stand alone. Windows gaped, black and hollow. He told himself it was the wind playing tricks through broken boards and empty door frames. Wind that sounded like a voice he hadn't heard in 3 years. Wind that sounded exactly like his brother. Jacob's hand drifted to the revolver on his hip, fingers brushing the grip. His horse shifted beneath him, ears flicking back. The animal felt it too, something wrong in the air, something that didn't belong. He'd been riding for 2 weeks straight, chasing a rumor of work near the Montana border. This ghost town wasn't supposed to be on his route. He'd taken a wrong turn somewhere back in the canyon country, and by the time he realized it, the sun was sinking and his water was low. He'd planned to ride through, maybe find a well that still worked, then push on before nightfall. That was before he heard his name. Jacob, I know you hear me. His throat tightened. The voice came from deeper in the town, somewhere past the skeletal remains of a saloon and a general store that had collapsed in on itself. It drifted through the stillness like smoke, soft and insistent. Thomas had been dead for 3 years. Jacob had watched him die, watched the fever take him slow and cruel in a tent outside Abilene, his skin burning, his breath rattling. Thomas had called his name then too, over and over, delirious and desperate. Jacob had held his hand until it went cold. He knew what death looked like. He knew what it sounded like. This wasn't death, this was something else. Jacob dismounted slowly, boots hitting the dirt without sound. He tied his horse to a post that looked barely strong enough to hold a breeze, let alone an animal. His hand stayed on his gun as he walked forward, each step measured, deliberate. The town swallowed him whole. Shadows pooled thick between the buildings, untouched by the dying light. Somewhere a shutter banged, once then stopped. The silence that followed felt alive, listening, waiting. Come on, brother, don't make me wait. Jacob's jaw clenched, his heart hammered against his ribs, but his face stayed stone. He'd learned a long time ago not to let fear show. Fear got you killed. Fear made you hesitate. But this wasn't fear, this was grief with teeth. He stopped in the center of what used to be the town square. A dry fountain stood cracked and crumbling, filled with nothing but dirt and the bones of something small. The voice had come from the building ahead, a 2-story structure that might have been a hotel once. Its door hung open, swaying slightly. Jacob stepped inside. The air inside was cold, not the cold of evening settling in, something deeper, older, like stepping into a cave that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. Dust motes hung suspended in the dim shafts of light that leaked through the broken ceiling. The floorboards groaned under his weight. Upstairs, Jacob's breath came shallow. He didn't move, couldn't, because the voice wasn't just similar. It wasn't just close, it was exact. Every inflection, every rough edge Thomas used to have when he was tired or annoyed or trying to get Jacob's attention across a campfire. The voice wasn't mimicking his brother, it was his brother, and that was impossible. Who are you? Jacob's voice came out hoarse, raw. He didn't shout. Shouting felt wrong here, like it might wake something that should stay sleeping. Silence, then softer. You know who I am. Jacob's hand tightened on his gun, but he didn't draw. He moved toward the staircase, each step a deliberate act of will. The stairs groaned under him, wood warped and weak. He half expected them to give way, to send him crashing through into whatever darkness waited below. They held. At the top a hallway stretched into shadow. Doors hung open on either side, revealing rooms stripped bare. No furniture, no life, nothing but stains on the walls and floors that Jacob didn't want to think about. The last door at the end was closed. In here, Jacob reached the door. His hand hovered over the handle. His mind screamed at him to turn around, to walk away, to get back on his horse and ride until this town was a memory he could bury. But Thomas had been his only family, the only person who'd ever looked at him and seen something worth staying for. If there was even a chance, he opened the door. The room was empty, completely, utterly empty. No furniture, no signs of life, just four walls, a broken window and a floor covered in dust so thick it looked like snow. But in the center of the room, in the dust, someone had written two words, "Find me." Jacob stared. The letters were fresh, finger-drawn, deliberate. The dust around them was disturbed, like someone had knelt there moments before. "This isn't real," he whispered. "Isn't it?" The voice came from behind him now. Jacob spun, gun drawn, hammer cocked. The hallway was empty, but at the far end, near the stairs, a shadow moved, not cast by anything, just moving, shaped like a man, shaped like someone Jacob used to know. "Thomas is dead," Jacob said, louder now, steadier. "I buried him. I said the words. You're not him." The shadow didn't respond. It just stood there, watching. Then it turned and walked down the stairs. Jacob followed. He didn't know why. Instinct, maybe, or something deeper, something that remembered what it felt like to have a brother, to not be alone in a world that didn't care if you lived or died. Downstairs the shadow was gone, but the front door stood wide open, and outside, in the fading light, Jacob saw boot prints in the dust, fresh ones, leading out of town, toward the canyon. He stood in the doorway, torn. Behind him the town felt like a mouth waiting to close. Ahead the prince led into wilderness, into the unknown. If he followed, he might never come back. If he didn't, he'd spend the rest of his life wandering. Jacob holstered his gun, walked outside, and started following the tracks. The boot prints led him into the canyon, just as the last light bled from the sky. Jacob moved carefully, eyes scanning the ground, the rocks, the shadows that pooled thick between the stone walls. His horse trailed behind him, reins loose in his hand. The prints were strange, too clear, too perfect, like they'd been pressed into the earth instead of walked, and they didn't waver, didn't show the natural variance of a man's gait. They just continued, step after identical step, leading him deeper. The canyon narrowed, walls rose steep on either side, cutting off the sky. The air grew colder. Jacob's breath plumed in front of him. Then the prince stopped, not faded, not obscured, just stopped. In the middle of the canyon floor, the trail ended as if whoever made them had simply vanished mid-stride. Jacob crouched, running his fingers over the last print. The dirt was cold, unnaturally so. He looked up, scanning the rocks, the ledges above. Nothing. "You came." Jacob shot to his feet, gun drawn. The voice echoed off the canyon walls, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Show yourself." His voice cracked against the stone, bouncing back at him. "I can't, not yet. You have to understand first." "Understand what?" Jacob's heart pounded. "What the hell are you?" A pause, long enough that Jacob thought the voice wouldn't answer. "Then I'm what's left." A chill crawled down Jacob's spine, that had nothing to do with the cold. "Thomas is dead," he said again, but his voice shook now. "I watched him die. You're not. You can't be." "I died, Jacob, but I didn't leave." The air shifted. Jacob felt it before he heard it. A presence moving in the darkness ahead. Not wind, not an animal, something that breathed wrong, moved wrong. A figure stepped into view. Jacob's blood turned to ice. It looked like Thomas. Same build, same clothes he'd been buried in, a worn shirt, dark trousers, boots Jacob had paid for with the last money they had. Same face too, down to the scar over his left eye from a bar fight in Dodge City. But the eyes were wrong, empty, like windows into a room with no light. "Stay back," Jacob warned, gun raised, hand steady, despite the tremor in his chest. The figure, Thomas, not Thomas, stopped, tilted its head. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Then what do you want?" "To be remembered, to be real again, even if just for a moment." The voice softened, almost pleading. "I've been here so long, Jacob. Alone, forgotten. This town, it holds us. The ones who died here, who were left behind. We can't leave. But when you came, I heard you, felt you, and I remembered what it was like to have a brother." Jacob's throat burned. His eyes stung. He wanted to believe it. God, he wanted to. But something was wrong. Something beneath the words, beneath the face that looked so much like the one he'd mourned. "If you're really Thomas," Jacob said slowly, "tell me something only he would know." The figure smiled. It wasn't Thomas's smile. You think memory makes me real. You think words prove anything. The smile widened. I'm real because you want me to be, because you're lonely, because you miss him. Jacob's gun didn't waver. Answer the question. The figure stepped closer. Jacob fired a warning shot. The bullet struck the canyon wall, ricocheting with a sharp crack. The figure didn't flinch. I'm all that's left of your brother Jacob. A shadow, a memory, an echo, but I'm here, and you can stay. You don't have to be alone anymore. Stay. Jacob's voice went cold. In this place, it's not so bad, once you stop fighting it. Jacob looked past the figure, deeper into the canyon, and he saw them, dozens of shadows, standing silent, watching, all shaped like people, all wrong, the ghosts of the ghost town, waiting. Jacob lowered his gun slowly, but he didn't holster it. His hand ached from gripping it so tight. How long have you been here? He asked quietly. The figure that wore his brother's face hesitated. For the first time something human flickered in those empty eyes, something that might have been pain. Time doesn't work right here. Days feel like years. Years feel like it stopped. Searching for words, like nothing, like everything. Jacob swallowed hard. Did it hurt? At the end, yes. The word hung between them, raw and honest. Jacob's chest tightened. He'd always wondered. Thomas had been delirious those last hours, thrashing and crying out. Jacob had hoped the fever had taken the pain away, made him numb. He should have known better. I'm sorry, Jacob said, and meant it. I should have done more. Found a doctor, found medicine, something. There was nothing you could have done. The voice was softer now, less echo, more human. You stayed. That's what mattered. You didn't leave me alone. Jacob's eyes burned. He blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. I buried you proper, he said words over you, left you in a place with trees and shade. I thought that would be enough, that you'd rest. I did rest, for a while. The figure looked down at its hands that looked solid, but cast no shadow. But something in me didn't want to let go, and this place, it feeds on that, on the parts of us that can't move on. Then leave, Jacob said urgently. Come with me, we'll figure it out. I can't. The figure met his eyes, and for just a moment, Jacob saw his brother there, really saw him, the boy who'd taught him to ride, who'd split his last piece of bread without being asked, who'd laughed loud, and loved hard, and died too young. I'm not Thomas anymore, Jacob. I'm just an echo, a memory that got stuck. And if you stay here, you'll become one too. The shadows behind the figure shifted closer. Jacob saw their faces now. Men, women, even a child, all empty, all waiting. They want you to stay, the figure said quietly. We want you to stay. It's so lonely here, so cold. And you're warm, you're real. You make us remember what it was like. Jacob's grip tightened on his gun again, not in threat, in fear. I can't stay, he whispered. I know. The figure Thomas, not Thomas, took a step back, then another. The shadows behind it began to fade, retreating into the darkness of the canyon. But before you go, the voice said, softer now, almost gentle, can you do something for me? Jacob nodded, unable to speak. Remember me, the real me, not this. It gestured at itself, at the wrongness. Remember the good parts, the way I laughed, the way I used to sing off key and didn't care, the way I always had your back, even when I shouldn't have. Jacob's voice cracked. I never stopped remembering. Then that's enough. That keeps me alive better than this place ever could. The figure smiled, and this time, it was Thomas's smile, real and warm, and heartbreaking. Go, Jacob. Live enough for both of us. Jacob wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to drag his brother's ghost out of this cursed place by force if he had to, but he knew the truth. Had known it the moment he'd heard that voice in the empty town. Thomas was gone, had been gone for 3 years. This was just the world's cruel way of saying goodbye twice. Jacob holstered his gun. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the only thing he had left of his brother, a tarnished pocket watch that had stopped working the day Thomas died. He set it on the ground between them. For you to keep, he said, so you're not empty-handed. The figure looked at the watch, reached for it. Its fingers passed through it like smoke, but when it pulled back, The watch was gone, and the figure looked a little more solid, a little more real. "Thank you." Jacob nodded once, turned, started walking back toward the canyon entrance, toward his horse, toward the world of the living. He didn't look back. Behind him, the shadows whispered his name one last time, pleading, begging, desperate. He kept walking. Jacob rode out of the canyon. As the first stars appeared, his horse moved quickly, eager to leave the place behind. The ghost town faded into the darkness, swallowed by distance and night. He didn't stop until dawn. When the sun finally rose, Jacob was miles away, camped beside a narrow creek. He built a small fire, made coffee, and sat staring into the flames. He'd spent 3 years carrying Thomas's death like a stone in his chest. 3 years of guilt and grief, and wondering if he could have done more. 3 years of hearing his brother's voice in his memory, wishing he could hear it one more time. Last night, he had, and it had been more painful than the silence. Jacob reached for the pocket where he'd kept the watch, then remembered he'd left it behind, given it to a ghost that couldn't hold it. In a canyon that fed on loneliness, he should have felt regret, should have felt loss. Instead he felt lighter, as if giving that last piece away had finally let him set the weight down. Jacob finished his coffee, doused the fire, and mounted his horse. He had no destination in mind, no job waiting, no place to be. He was a cowboy without a home, drifting through a west that was slowly vanishing, but he was alive. And Thomas, the real Thomas, the one who'd laughed and sung off-key and split his last bread, wouldn't have wanted him to stop living just because he'd died. "Live enough for both of us." Jacob clicked his tongue, urging his horse forward. The sun climbed higher, warm on his back. The land stretched out before him, endless and unforgiving, and beautiful. Behind him, far away in a canyon he'd never returned to, a ghost watched him go. It stood at the canyon's edge, holding a pocket watch that didn't exist, feeling the faint warmth of memory, and for just a moment, one fleeting, impossible moment, it felt real. Years later, when Jacob was old and worn, and sitting by a fire of his own making, someone would ask him if he believed in ghosts. He'd be quiet for a long time, then he'd say, "I believe in echoes, pieces of people that get left behind, and I believe sometimes, if you listen close enough, you can hear them saying goodbye." He'd stare into the flames, seeing a face he hadn't seen in decades. But the real haunting isn't in the hearing, it's in the remembering, and that stays with you long after the ghosts are gone. The fire would crackle, the night would deepen, and somewhere in a canyon no map could find, a shadow would tilt its head and smile.